Yeah. But, if they go out the other way. Getting tired of waiting to get on the lake, because of the rest. Yes. Yes. But that, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. Not really. You're the one. No. I just showed you where, you know. It's just way too many people.
Good evening. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Caldwell Hearing Examiner for May 10th, 2022. I serve in both a decision-making capacity and an advisory capacity to the mayor and city council. There are two types of public hearings that this commission conducts. The first is the legislative hearing, whereby we formulate recommendations on certain land use requests. My recommendations are then forwarded onward to the city council who makes a decision on legislative matters. The second type of public hearing is quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that the requests are specific to a parcel of land. I am authorized to make a decision on requests for special use permits, variances, preliminary plat, time extensions, and planned unit developments that do not involve subdivision of land. However, any decision I may make tonight is by no means final. Anyone that believes he or she has been aggrieved by my decision has a right to file an appeal to the city council. On quasi-judicial requests that involve the subdivision of land, rezones, and annexation, I am authorized to only make recommendations to the city council will make the decision. The hearing procedures as required by the Idaho Code are as follows. One, the staff will first present a report on the application. Two, the applicant or applicant's representatives will then present the summary of the request. Three, testimony of those in support will be taken, followed by testimony from those in neutral position, followed by those in opposition. I will allow the applicant or applicant's representative rebuttal time. After rebuttal testimony is given, public testimony is closed, and no new or oral testimony will be allowed unless I elect to reopen the testimony. The time limits for testimony are as follows. The applicant will receive 10 minutes. Those in favor, those neutral and opposed receive 5 minutes, and I'll allow 5 minutes for rebuttal from the applicants. I accept oral and written testimony from those in attendance, but only if you sign the sign-up sheet. When testifying before me, you must come to the podium, state your full name and address, and acknowledge that you've been sworn in. I ask everyone to treat all parties with fairness and respect. I will not tolerate any outbursts. I also ask those in attendance to please turn off your cell phones. I'm a volunteer hearings commissioner and receive small compensation for my efforts. I'm charged by law to keep a clear record of the proceedings, consider factual testimony, and to stay with the city's code and state rules and regulations. We, the city staff, thank you for your courtesy to us and to others as we move through the process. And with that, we'll go to tonight's agenda. The first item under new business is case number VAR 22-2. I request by Donald Phillips, Stephanie for your property line setback variance. With that, I'd like staff to please make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 61 Cleveland Boulevard. Today we have the variance request for a 30-foot a variance request to reduce the 20-foot rear setback in an R1 zone to 10 foot for the purpose of constructing a 30-foot by 40-foot RV storage garage in the southwest corner of this property. The reason for this is the applicant wanted to keep their RV off the street because they are located next to two corners, and having the RV there did create a vision problem for safety reasons. And they wanted a way to protect their RV from the elements, and that wouldn't, so the neighborhood wouldn't see it, and so they went with this RV shed, storage garage. And they did have quite a few communications with city, and through some confusion, there was problems with their placement, which is why they're asking for the variance. The applicant can speak on this more when they come up, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I don't have any information on the building height, but I think the elevations. I'd like I guess the applicants can address that, but give a little more information on what it's actually going to look like. Did you receive any blueprints, photos, or anything to that effect?
I did receive elevations. They weren't in color. They were, since I am not a builder, they were a bit difficult for me to actually, read. I know the elevation from the base to the, I believe the roof is 16 foot. The applicant can probably confirm that when they come up. It is one of those, I believe it's R&M is the company, just those normal steel buildings, pre-built, so they come out and build for you.
Okay. Because this is the last stop for this type of application. I'd like to have the elevations and some of that height information and so forth. Thank you, Mr. Jones. The applicant, please, would you like to make a presentation?
My name is Donald Eastep. I live at 2308 Terrace Drive, Caldwell, Idaho, and I am the applicant with my wife. Thank you, Mr. Examiner, for giving us a few minutes tonight.
Thank you.
The building itself is a pre-manufactured building ordered out of California, and they shipped and delivered that in December. The RV that we're putting in the building is 13 foot 8 inches tall. That's the height requirement for the RV to not damage any of the air conditioners or antennas or anything like that. So we had to go with a building that had 16 foot walls to allow for the roll-up door when we put the door in it, so that there's that space available above the door that has to be 14 foot tall. We picked a low pitch on the building, less than a 5/12 pitch. We picked like a 2.5, 3/12 pitch to keep the height of the building down and still maintain the snow load requirement by the state of Idaho and the wind requirements. So the total height of the building, I believe, the walls are 16 foot at the eave, and it has about 1.5 foot of rise in the 15 foot running to the peak of the building.
17.5.
So it's less than 17.5. I'm pretty sure it's closer to like 17.2 or something like that. I did submit a set of engineered prints to the planning and zoning when I submitted the permit request, so they have a full set of engineered prints with elevations and everything. The color of the building, the body of the building is a light gray, almost like on the walls here, with a white trim, and then once that's done, we're gonna do a paint match to paint the house to match. I did have a timeline of events that's occurred since we started this process back in October and November of 2019. It originally was going to be a pole barn, much like other barns in the area, or garages, and, the other side of the property, but we, as it was mentioned, we couldn't put it there because of the slight curve in Terrace Drive causing a safety triangle issue. When we purchased our property, it had an RV parking noted on the property as being there where we were going to put the building, so it was suggested then that we might move it to the other side of the building. We wouldn't have to worry about an access to the property or a curb cut or any of that, because we would use the existing driveway. And so we took down a 120-foot sycamore tree out of the backyard, put the concrete slab in for that, and then submitted a print for a pole barn structure. We were told that the pole barn structure would require engineering because the walls had to be 16 foot tall. The engineering for that, when I talked to like 5 different engineers, was over $5,000 or $6,000. So we started researching manufactured steel buildings. Well, much to our luck, COVID hit, and the cost of steel buildings has pretty much doubled since we did that, and you cannot get a set of engineered prints from a steel manufactured building manufacturer without purchasing the building. So we went ahead, we knew what size we needed, the concrete was there, we went ahead and ordered the building, thinking all we have to do is submit the prints to the city and that's gonna be no fuss, no problem. Then we were told we had to engineer the footings for the building. So finally, a few months later, we found an engineer to engineer the footings at an additional cost. Engineers, for some reason, aren't very cheap. And so $2,000 later, we got some engineered pier sets for the building to cut the existing concrete slab, put in the columns, and that will fit the slab, and the building will fit the slab, and everything will be hunky-dory at that point. Then we were told, once we got everything submitted with all the engineered prints and all the pictures they wanted and everything to the planning and zoning for the building permit, that we can't put the building where we have planned because there's a 20-foot setback, not the setback I read in, I guess, old city ordinances or something. But anyway, I must have misread something somewhere, because if I slide that building forward 10 feet, I run into several problems, and which cause hardships, I believe, on my wife and I. The whole process has been kind of a hardship because of the amount of time spent and the amount of money spent, but we don't need to go there. My wife and I are both disabled veterans. My wife's 100%, and I'm currently 70%. And I've been 100% with past surgeries. We've intended all along to put a concrete apron around the entire house as part of this process, so that we'll have wheelchair access completely around the entire property with gates that can lock and all that kind of stuff. One of the things we look forward in our planning is that at some point we're going to be in a wheelchair, either myself or my wife, more than likely, sooner than later. And so the back door access is only one step up, which would be the most logical place for us to put an access ramp for a wheelchair. And if I move this building forward 10 more feet, then that's not going to leave me adequate access for another vehicle to pull in and offload a wheelchair into that area. And I'll have to find a different way to make a handicap access. By placing the building forward, it may not leave adequate room to bring any other piece of equipment into the backyard from that side either. So those are my major concerns, and it prevents our ability to utilize the property the way it was intended when we bought our forever home that we thought we were gonna live in and make for our old folks' home, living in our wheelchairs and motoring around the neighborhood. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. I do have a couple of questions, back to the elevation, and the exterior treatment. Are the windows proposed in the structure? You have windows?
No, sir, I did not plan the building with any windows in it.
Okay, did you plan exterior lighting? Other than like your back porch light,
Just solar lights, just solar security lights around the property, but I move those around all the time. I move them on my eve of my house now.
okay, yeah, the, type of structure, you know, shouldn't provide an inconvenience to the neighbors, particularly, when we're looking at, a variance. And so I was just trying to get a handle on where that, you know, lighting, noise, you know, windows, so forth, would be facing the neighbors.
Yeah, I've planned no windows or lighting that's going to shine over our fence even. I do have lighting on my back porch for the driveway and stuff like that.
Okay,
And it's all motion activated, so it doesn't stay on, it goes off and on based on if there's motion outside.
okay. And also the, it is discussed in the staff report about the easements, utility easements, 10 feet on either side, and your pad is clear of those?
Yes, sir, there is a 10-foot irrigation easement on the back of the property. The irrigation line is actually dead now. They killed it a few years back, but I still left the easement space not to encroach any of that easement. And then there's a 6-foot utility easement on the south side of the property.
Okay, and is the, it's hard to tell, but is the driveway, in that easement? The 6-foot easement?
Yeah, the driveway just crosses on the street and then down the side of the driveway. Any easement isn't gonna be utilized in the building or necessarily the parking for anything permanent. And if there was to be any issues of easement, we would remove concrete or whatever and give permission for that. We wouldn't argue with any of that.
Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you very much, Mr. Easton.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. We have, Phyllis Easton, would you like to testify, please?
Phyllis Step, 2308 Terrace Drive, Caldwell. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for taking your time to hear this. And I would like to thank all the people over here that put up with all the people like me that don't know anything. I wish to express my opinion on the requested variance for the rear setback on the R1 zone from 20 feet to the 10 feet for the purpose of building a 30 by 40 RV storage garage. It is my understanding that I must prove a hardship to receive this variance. When we bought this property, it was listed as having RV parking. On the side over there where the grass is, there's a cement driveway, and that's where they said the RV parking was. We thought we could put a garage up there, that would be convenient. When we went down to planning and zoning, those folks told us that we couldn't because of some triangular variant or visibility problem with the curve in the road, which I don't think most people have any idea that their property is affected by a curve in the road, but we found out quickly. The next option we had was to put it on the other side of our property, and we used the money that we had left over to pour the concrete for the path. My husband read the regulations we had downloaded, but never saw the portion that said if over 600 square feet building, it is a 20-foot setback. We filed for the building permit with drawings, etc. We were told we must submit a blueprint. We got the blueprint when the building was delivered, not before. Then we were told that we had to have blueprint of the footings, so we paid over $2,000 for a blueprint for the footings. I understand that money is not a hardship as far as you folks are concerned. That's not part of this. But the problem is, how much can a building cost when I mean, I just wanted the building, not all this other stuff. Planning and zoning then told us that we had the wrong setback. Because of the size of the building, which had not changed since the process started approximately 2 years ago, we read where we could request a waiver from the director. So I called and spoke with him. He was a very nice man. He told me that he could do a variance for 4 feet. That was his jurisdiction. But that we would still be 6 feet too close. So we would have to apply to this body and pay the $1,200+ for this meeting. We have a meeting, we mailed the notices, we met with our neighbors, we got their signatures, and we asked for their approval in doing this, and all of them agreed because it's not a problem, they don't care. Now, the hardship part. One, we cannot use one side of our property due to the curve in the street. I would say there are not many folks who know about the triangulation of a curve in the road and how it can affect how you use or build on your property. Two, that after every step to put this RV garage to protect our RV by storing it indoors, on-site, off the road, and out of the danger of people not being able to see past this 34-foot log, and kids and, you know, everything else, every step costs more and more money. I know you don't care. I'm a 100% disabled veteran, and I have a lung disease. I've been told multiple times that I will end up in a wheelchair, and that while I will be on oxygen full-time for the lung disease. My husband is 70% disabled, and he has applied at the advice of his doctor to file for 100% disability. His mobility is already affected and will continue to decline. We live on a fixed income. Both of us are VA check recipients. To this point, where if we are to the point where if we cannot get this variance, we cannot afford to store our RV off-site and protect it, and they don't want it in the road. I don't want it in the road. The duplex next to us, the very next door, is rated R1, and it's 2 houses, okay? The building next to it is a triplet, and it is rated R2. So I have a hard time understanding why this isn't mixed use when 2 doors down it is. But they said something about grandfathering and way beyond my scope. Moving the building to comply with this would leave about 3 to 4 foot from the very edge of the roof to the building, which even bringing stretchers in or anything else would make it very difficult, and otherwise they got to bring it up 4 stairs in the front. I would close with a request that you approve our variance for our RV garage so these 2 vets can enjoy the home in Caldwell where they chose to be their forever home. We love it on Canyon Hill because of the diversity, and by not allowing this, but looking simply at other variances that are allowed, it would seem wrong to disallow such a simple request. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Those are the only sign-ups we have to testify, so I have no further questions of staff. With that, I'll close the testimony and move to the analysis stage. As the applicants have mentioned, variance criteria are dependent on hardship. We have to make findings of hardship having to do with the physical characteristics of the property, location, setting, other things that would make the use of their property more difficult compared to the neighbors around them. Briefly, with the staff report in testimony that we've heard, I do find that there is a substantial case for hardship to justify the reduction of the setback. And I concur with the comprehensive plan analysis and policies in the staff report down on page 3 and page 4. The findings of facts are as follows. And this is from page 4 of the staff report. The Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The proposed use is conditionally permitted by the terms of the ordinance and is subject to conditions of approval. And section 8.1 refers to section 8.2, findings on the various criteria and they are stated on page 3 as referred to. The next section, conclusions of law. The Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case in order that it be approved or denied. Excuse me. The public notice requirements were met, and the hearing was conducted within guidelines of applicable Idaho code and ordinances. The order decision, based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby orders the case number VAR 22-2, a request by Donald and Phyllis Estep for a rear property line setback variance in the R1 zone to reduce the setback from 20 feet to 10 feet for the purpose of constructing a 30 by 40 foot RV storage garage in the southwest corner of parcel R06955 at 2308 Terrace Drive, Caldwell, Idaho, is approved with the following conditions. There are, on page 4 of the report and 4 and 5, there are conditions 10.2 through 10.7. And like to add 2 condition 10.5 that says the RV storage room shall be constructed located in substantial compliance with the site plans presenting exhibit A3 attached here to, and with the building elevations submitted to staff with the application. And with that, I close this hearing and we'll move to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is case number SUP 22-2, a request by Canyon County to develop approximately 10,000 square foot warehouse building for the document retention, archiving, PPE storage, furniture, and surplus equipment storage. And with that, I would like the staff to make the report presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Debbie Root, Senior Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. This application is before you. The Canyon County Facilities is requesting a special use permit to construct a 10,000 square foot warehouse building. This is, warehousing requires that in the C3 zone requires a special use permit. And because it's a public facility, it also requires a special use permit. The site plan that was provided meets the setbacks and code requirements for landscaping have been met as well. The access requirements according to the fire district were fine as well. This property is located at next to the animal shelter on Gray Lane on property owned by Canyon County. They also have the DMV in that area. So this storage facility makes great sense for the location and for the county access and placement for it. Staff is recommending approval, and I'll ask the question.
Thank you, Ms. Drew. I have no questions. It's pretty clear in the staff report. I thank you for that. And I'd like to go to the applicant, Mr. Britton.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Rick Britton, Canyon County Director of Operations for the Canyon County. Address 1115 Albany Street. Again, we are just looking at building a warehouse building on a piece of property that the county owns already adjacent to the animal shelter. Again, this will house and hold PPE equipment for emergency management, surplus items, and just different items in our warehouse building. Right now, we rent a 5,000 square foot building. This doubles our size, and again, this would 10 years would pay for itself, save the taxpayers money.
Thank you very much. Just one question, what kind of traffic do you anticipate with this use?
Minimal traffic, because it would be pretty much just, the facilities department and maybe a couple other entities going in and out of that, that warehouse, but not very much. Because it's on right at a, kind of a roundabout right there at the end of the street.
Okay, and, how many employees do you anticipate, having here, just roughly?
At that site, we are not gonna house any employees there. It'll just, employees will be coming from the courthouse back and forth. Again, picking up or dropping off, material or, just extra equipment from the courthouse. If there's surplus items, we will take it down there, we auction them off. But again, it's just minimal. There will not be anybody housed at that area.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Britton, appreciate your testimony.
Yep.
We have, Rick, Bagstad. Sorry, did I pronounce it correctly?
No problem, Rick Bugach, I'm the architect for the county, and I just wanted to stand for any technical questions you may have on the building or the site itself.
No, the staff report was fairly complete. I do have, this is just my own problem, sometimes these prints are a little hard to read and they're so tiny, but, the concerns about the use itself and the exterior look of the building are clear, and I appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all we had signed up for testifying. I have no further questions of the staff. With that, I'll move to the analysis section. I agree with the staff report comprehensive plan analysis found on page 2, 3 of the staff report. The findings of facts, the Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, the public testimony and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. Proposed use is conditionally permitted by the terms of the ordinance and is subject to conditions of approval. The conclusions of law, page 3 of the staff report, the Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case in order that it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met, and the hearing was conducted within the guidelines of applicable Idaho code and city ordinances. The order of decision, based on the findings of facts, conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby orders that case number SUP 22-2, request by Canyon County Facilities to construct an approximately 10,000 square foot warehouse building for indoor storage of documents, retention, archiving, PPE storage, furniture, and surplus equipment storage is approved with the following conditions of approval. They are as follows, found on page 3 of the staff report, conditions 8.2 through 8.7. And we have no further additions to that. With that, I'll close the hearing, and thank you very much for your participation. The next item on the agenda is case number PUD 22-1, and I'm sorry, I got the wrong one here. It's actually on case number AMN 22-3 and SUP 22-1. Request by Penelope Consacus on behalf of Justin Fishburne for an annexation of parcels R32487, approximately 5.4 acres, or 84 acres, and R3247801, approximately 8.18 acres, with a zoning designation of R3 high-density residential. And with that, I'd like to ask staff report, after the staff report, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Just again, Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 61 Cleveland Boulevard. Today we have Lavender Crossing, a development with 288 residential units that consist of 12 apartment buildings. The surrounding uses are to the north, county, that is the city park. To the south is an R1 and R2 zoning. We have Weston Point number 2 and Weston Point number 5, and to the west is Weston Point number 2. Where to start? With this, staff has had conversation with the engineering department and have run into some problems with connectivity through this, with the current plan. With that, we found this development to be inconsistent with the two comprehensive plan, components of land use and transportation. Having all the multifamily traffic travel through the Weston Point number 5 subdivision on Comm Avenue leads the engineering and planning departments to say this development's current plan is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan components. Through conversation with the engineering department, we believe the development needs to have Lastern Lane be the primary access and Comm Avenue be emergency access only. And I stand for further questions.
I think, Mr. Jones, the discussion with the engineering department, first of all, there's stated this might be a question for Rob, but the says due to the nature, complexity, and many civil improvements required in multifamily land development projects, leading to apartment quarters, recommends that this project be required to complete the land development process in the same manner as standard subdivision. And that said recommendation be made a condition of approval. Rob, would you elucidate that for me a little bit? I'm not clear on that point.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, what, if you wouldn't mind directing me to the language that you just read and what part of the
Page
report?
2, about 2/3 of the way down. Mr. France, at your engineering comments, the asterisk before the paragraph there.
So, Mr. Hearing Examiner, this is, because of the complexity, as the statement says, of these types of multifamily developments, it gets, the phasing of these developments gets tricky, and so the engineering department has, the way that staff compiles and puts together these developments for review and for development is similar to that of a subdivision where the utilities have to be extended in. Fire protection has to be available as the buildings begin to go vertical, and so this is just simply stating that the engineering department goes through a specific process of plan review and treats this similar to a subdivision in order to keep things organized and make sure that it is developed in the proper sequence.
And so, we don't have, or do we have a procedural issue with this hearing in that regard, or we're just extending that review to cover the basis of this type of application?
Correct, the second.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't clear what that meant, because otherwise, normally you'd have, I guess you'd use subdivision application. Is that lacking here, or is it not required?
No, in this case, it's not required, and it's not a subdivision plat. And so for that reason, that language is put in just so that it's clear that we will follow, as part of the plan review, we follow that similar process as if it were a subdivision plat during plan review.
Okay, so we're clear on the process. Now, and this is probably a question for you. The focus of the staff report is about the ingress-egress point, and could you have that discussion, what the issues are with that, please?
Yes, I would be happy to have that discussion. We've struggled with this area quite a bit over the last several years, and, we've been trying to figure out what the best way is, to provide access as this develops. Now, the access and the trip generation is all contingent on what is proposed. And oftentimes early on, we don't know what is being proposed specifically, until a developer gets to a certain point, and then we know how many units there are, or we have a traffic impact study and we understand what the trip generation is. In this case, the applicant has proposed, and expressed interest in connecting to, this stub street that is down here in this subdivision, and using that as a primary access. It was clear, from the beginning, based on what the proposed developments were, that that could be problematic. And it is clear now with the number of units that are proposed here that we certainly would not want to push, all of that traffic down through this subdivision. It would certainly be, a better situation for all of these residents here and even for these residents that are in the new proposed subdivision, to have access up on Laster Lane, which will be which is a collector road that will provide access out to Lake, or over to the boulevard.
It's not clear to me, in fact, there's very little information. I'm not seeing a detailed site plan in here. I have your notes and comments. But, okay, the question is does that have contiguity with Laster Lane that could potentially provide that access?
That is a very good question. So the parcel here, on the parcel, there is a flag strip of land that comes up to Laster, and that is not wide enough for any type of street, public or private. And so it is the engineering department's feeling that it would be, it's probably in the best interest for this developer to meet with this other development that is proposing a development in the near future, to come up with a solution to be able to have an access point that comes up here to Laster. That access point does not need to be a public road, which means it does not have to be the full 53-foot right-of-way. It can be a private road, and therefore a little bit more narrow. Okay, I'm being corrected by Ms. Root about whether that can be private or not. So I guess we need to get on the same page there. But the point of the matter is that it is in the city's best interest for this entire area to have some sort of access for this development to be able to get up to Laster, and that may require some coordination or some planning between the two different property owners.
Thank you. I'd also like part of that discussion about private or public. It seems like a development of this magnitude would require public right-of-way frontage. Where are we at on that?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, Deb Root, Senior Planner. So the concern is in meeting the code. Currently, our zoning code does not allow for private streets. It does provide for internal circulation for multifamily development. The question is does this access to the actual property where the homes begin to be built qualify, or does internal circulation extend to Laster Lane for a development that's quite a ways away? It does not meet the common driveway code, because it's greater than 150 feet to the development. And so we have some code issues there if it's not a public street.
Thank you, Ms. Groot. The Southern Street access, and I'm sorry, I don't have a clear site plan here, the connection to the south, would not fulfill a public right-of-way requirement because it's insufficient to handle the traffic. Is that the staff's position?
Yes, Mr. Heron, examiner. The proposed project generates somewhere in the ballpark of 1,600 trips per day. And typically, the city standard is that more than 1,000 trips per day on a residential street approaches where we would like to limit or cut off any additional flow. And so, as we look at this, we have determined that it would certainly be overextending those public streets. And in addition to that, it is certainly something that we would not promote to have a high-density development of this magnitude, take access through an existing subdivision that is an R1 that has been in place for several years.
Thank you. Rob, could you expand that aerial photo so I can see to the south of it where that would connect to the collector? What are we talking about there? What kind of distance and what's the street down below there?
So this is Homedale Road.
Okay.
On the south here, and then the route would come down here. It would connect, and then it would either come down this way out to Homedale, or it would come down this way, by which the traffic would be passing dozens and dozens of residential houses.
And your estimates are upwards of 1,000 ADTs?
According to the traffic impact study, it is 1,633, and that may change slightly because I think the number of units is about 10 units less, and so it's in that 1,600.
Okay, that's highly significant in addition to what's already there. And then to examine just a little bit further, if you scan back to the north of that and look at the connection to Laster, they have how many feet of access on it looks like a dirt road there. How wide is that?
So I think it sounds like it varies, but it's somewhere in the ballpark of 20 feet wide.
Okay, the narrowest point, okay. And so by any standard, that would not suffice as a public right-of-way or frontage to a public right-of-way. Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Jones, the application is asking for R3 and for high density and comprehensive plan. Are there policies to promote or substantiate the request for R3 at this location? Or what do the policies say for this high density designation?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, can you clarify your question for me?
What does the comprehensive plan say about the R3, the densities allowed and the type of development in the high density land use designation?
In high density multifamily housing is allowed, apartments, townhomes. The residential gross density should not exceed 25 units per gross acre or 40 units per gross acre for PUD. We're not dealing with that at this moment. So this does fit with the high density use The comprehensive plan does have this listed as high-density residential. I believe they are under the 25 units per gross acre for this development. I remember. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, I wanted to set the upper limit on that, according to the comprehensive plan. The other question is, you know, what does the comprehensive plan say about, this access to right-of-way, street frontage, the health, safety, welfare aspects of that? It seems like, it'd be hard to justify the comprehensive plan policies, given they don't have that type of, required, frontage or right-of-way access.
Yes, for the golden policy of the comprehensive plan, if you look under transportation, under the first goal, so it's provide for effective, safe, and cost-effective movement of people. Efficient, I can read. So for the policy, it's designed local streets in a manner that provides good interconnectivity as well as connectivity to adjacent developments. The problem with this current plan is that connectivity is only through an adjacent development. It does not exit anywhere else for these, so that would not match the transportation goals for the comprehensive plan.
Mr. Jones, would you give me the chapter and verse on the goal, please?
I believe that's chapter 9. Let me double check for you. Yes, chapter 9, that's goal number 1, policy 1-4.
Thank you.
And then we also run into, for the goals of policy of land use, for goal number 1, would you like me to read that off for you?
Yeah, the chapter and verse, please.
Yes, so goal number 1, establish land use management policies that protect property rights and the environment, maintain a high quality of life, provide adequate land for all types of development, and adequately buffer non-compatible uses. For policy 1-1, it is guide the growth and development of land uses in such a way that the health, safety, and general welfare of residents will be protected. Staff would like to say that funneling all this car traffic into a residential subdivision where going by all these homes where these families go out and play, that it would not be the safest for the residents of the other subdivision and for the residents of this proposed development.
Okay, I think, Mr. Jones, switching topics here, we have a letter from the Valley View School District, and unfortunately for our community, we have received a similar letter for a great number of the recent applications, but the school district, in effect, recommended either denial or delay. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you had, this is a letter from April 5th, 2022, from Lisa Boyd. What's the staff's position on their concerns?
Staff shares the same concerns with all citizens about the schools being overcrowded. Stopping development, we don't believe is the best option because these developments help pay the taxes for these schools. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. At this time, we need the development to help pay for roadways and taxes for the school district, but the development is overcrowding the schools. And the problem we're seeing now is that these are from developments that were approved years ago and being built now, not from developments being approved at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. That's a terrible conundrum that, you know, this is a community, if not nationwide issue, with a growing population. We've had that discussion in virtually every hearing in the last year. The city has to face the almost exponential growth that's going on here. It's no excuse either way, and it's somewhat beyond the purview of this board. It's a citywide issue, a mayor and council issue, a statewide issue. we can't address that grievance, but I'd just like to draw on record of feeling the pain for the school district and understanding their position. Their letter points out that they're already at capacity, anticipating the already approved subdivisions. It's going to go very far beyond capacity. That's just one more concern that we have to look at, and also is addressed by the comprehensive plan policies that we have to work together with the other agencies to make sure everybody participates in development patterns. Let's see. Look at staff report, Mr. Jones, in page 10, item 9.2, some golden policies of transportation. Your note there is, so the development is consistent, but the policy says the development is inconsistent. Could you clear that up for me, please?
That will need to be a correction on my part. It was supposed to be development is inconsistent with these components of the comp plan.
And then final paragraph on that page. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Right, okay, I'd like to make that correction to the staff report. I also have just one small drawing in the staff report of the proposal. There's not a lot of information to go on. Are the additional site plans and landscaping plans and such that for the public review, and have they been available to the public?
Yes, there are site plans and landscape plans available. I missed some. I do not know how I did that. I know the applicant has brought copies for you to show, and those can be added to future staff reports.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure what this thing looks like.
I apologize for that.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. John, just to be perfectly clear for the public, what is the staff recommendation on this proposal?
Staff would recommend most likely either to continue the case with the possibility of a different site plan showing access onto Laster instead of Calm Avenue. If they could provide us a plan that is consistent with engineering's comments, then we believe that this might be a possibility.
Thank you very much. With that, I'd like to ask the applicant to make their presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. For the record, Penelope Constant Heikes with Riley Planning Services, representing the Fishburns for this project, Post Office Box 405, Boise, Idaho 83701. If I may approach, sir, I have 11 by 17 copies of all the materials that might help you look at things.
Thanks, Penelope. Enter this as Exhibit ANN 22-3, number 1.
For the record, I would like to explain that there's a cover sheet that lists all the items that are being provided to the hearing examiner. The application before you this evening is for an annexation of the zoning designation of R3 and a special use permit for 288-unit multifamily on a 14-acre parcel with a future land use map designation of high-density residential. I thought I was pretty clear about our expectation that not all the traffic would be run through the subdivision to the south initially. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. The staff report does have some very generic information about the proposal. There are engineering comments, and then there's some comprehensive plan analysis that's provided. As I stated already, the project team understands engineering's concerns with running traffic from 288 units through, the Weston Point subdivision, and that has never been our intent. I'd like to start by going through the materials that you received. I think Kimley Horn and Cole Architects did an excellent job of taking the applicant's vision for what they wanted on the site and turning it into reality. So we have modern architecture that blends well with a variety of architectural types. It's modern, but it's not sharp or abrupt. It's pleasant. Just some details, such as all the heating, cooling, and water heating units are located in each individual unit. So there are no mechanical units on the ground around the foundations of any of these buildings. The buildings were rotated to an east-west axis to produce massing, especially for the folks to the west of us. There's a perimeter pathway that runs the full perimeter of that site that's over 3,000 linear feet, so about 0.6 of a mile, and it's built to be a macro path, so it has the width and the landscaping associated with it. We were pretty excited about it. You'll notice on the site plan that there are lots of on-ramps and off-ramps for that pathway, so people can select a 15-minute walk or an hour walk. It's also going to be available for anyone who lives in the neighborhood that would like to access it, especially the folks to the south and to the Buxton parcel. When it comes online, there's no reason why there can't be a connection between this pathway and any pathways that the Buxton parcel anticipates as a part of their development application. There are amenities for children. We have 2 EV charging stations. There's about 300 trees on that site. That doesn't include the 2.7 acres worth of turf. And we thought that the landscape architect did an excellent job of putting together a unified and thoughtful site plan. We do understand also that all amenities will need to be constructed with the first phase of the development. So the intention is to build 4 to 5 buildings in the first phase, which would restrict the amount of traffic southbound, and if the engineering department would put up, I have an exhibit called Lansdowne and Hargrove Capacity and Additional Trips. That one right there. So I'm looking at a section that comes out of the CIS where they discuss the current capacity or the current trip load that's on these 2 streets to the south. Lansdowne Avenue currently is carrying 442 vehicle trips, which is below 50% of its 1,000 vehicle trip ideal capacity. Hargrove Avenue is currently carrying 505 vehicle trips. This is based on real-time data that was collected by the traffic engineer recently. So that's slightly above 50% of the capacity. Based on that 1,000 vehicle trips per day, it would be the ideal trip level on those 2 streets. So I looked at that and wondered if we constructed 4 to 5 structures, how many trips would that add? And would we, with 4 to 5 structures, penetrate that 1,000 vehicle trip level? And we wouldn't. If we built 4 buildings, we'd end up with 701 vehicle trips on Lansdowne, and we'd have 764 vehicle trips on Hargrove. Neither of those, of course, reach the 1,000 vehicle trip level. So we've always understood that we couldn't run all of the trips through there, and trying to find a sweet spot that would get some of the buildings built, not all of them, and still respect that threshold that the city of Caldwell has for vehicle trips. So that's what that exhibit is about. And I have hard copies I will give to staff at the end of my presentation. So the staff report does really just distill down to 3 items. One of them is platting the subdivision, platting the site as a subdivision. And I would like to offer that the intention of platting this as a subdivision has always been in the plan. We have our water monitoring done, the geotech report is done. All the materials that were submitted with the application include things like preliminary engineer drawings, the site plan shows fire hydrants. We've got all the radiuses in there that we need. Everything is really pretty much ready to submit as a subdivision. We wanted to move forward with the special use permit at the front end to make sure that we were good to go with the subdivision. The other item is if we do it as a standard subdivision, the thresholds for building footprints or the thresholds for lots for those buildings are so excessive that we get nowhere near a high-density residential development. I was before you recently for the El Monterey project on Marble Front, and we had 10-foot setbacks on all those buildings, and we'd like to duplicate that again, especially since we don't have any public streets running through the project. So we'd like to use a PUD process with the subdivision and get those reduced building lots so that we can reach that, get close to the density that the city of Caldwell has specified. We do have 20 units per acre, which is below the 25 units that is allowed in an R3 zone. Our concern, and I think that there probably was just an unusually high level of misunderstanding that occurred in this process between the applicant team and the city staff, which is unfortunate, but maybe we can get that clarified today. If the access, any level of access to Calm Avenue to the south is denied, then the parcel is in essence landlocked, which I think is a problem. It's not a good idea. We have no information coming from the Buxton site development team. The staff report and engineering comments talk about a proposed access point to Laster Lane. We have no knowledge of that and have not seen anything. There is an exhibit in that packet again that's a 3-page item. It has the name of Calm Avenue and Laster right-of-way. So the first sheet there just shows a location of the public right-of-way to the south and the site, the actual dimensions of the site. The second page of this exhibit, if you'll cursor down, go down one, please, thank you. It shows where the applicant actually has the ability to dedicate right-of-way to Laster Lane, and it's just that small section where the driveways, the current driveways touch Laster Lane. The third page of that exhibit shows an extension of Laster Lane. If I understand engineering's comments correctly, they're asking the applicant to extend Laster Lane eastward, and I just dropped in a red rectangle there that shows where an access point would be. We have no way to control that parcel. The applicant has no way to compel anyone that owns private property to do any of those things. The applicant is not opposed to a Laster Lane access point. At this point, we're powerless to do anything about that. We have to wait. And if the parcel is landlocked because no access to the south is allowed, then my applicant is waiting an indeterminate period of time for a speculative development that may or may not occur. We don't know until it's approved that it's done. So again, I'd like to go back to this concept that never at any time was it anticipated that all 288 unit traffic would go to the south. There's a sweet spot we can hit there that doesn't overload Hargrove and Lansdale, but still allows the developer to move forward with some of the structures. I think, I understand the Valley View School letter. I actually went to the State Board of Education website and looked at their statistics. One of the things that's interesting about especially elementary schools is there's a tremendous amount of fluctuation from year to year. They can go from 400 students to 700 students, and then down to 500 students, and it's just all over the place. So the school enrollments aren't stable. They change year to year. And you're correct that the best way to upgrade your school inventory is by approving development. Apartments apparently don't generate as many school-age children as single-family residences do. The staff, or the traffic impact study lists a number of subdivisions that are to the west, northwest, and southwest of the site that total 1,500 residences. So, I understand Valley View's concern. Think that with the blend of, we have 3 bedrooms, 2 bedroom, and 1 bedroom units anticipated in this development with actual ratios that are located on the materials you have. So, the idea that we would generate a tremendous overload of the school district with this one development is probably a little bit beyond logic. Children show up sometimes whether we want them to or not, but I'm not sure that this development is going to be solely responsible for overloading the school district. So if I look at the engineering memorandum, we've looked at this exhibit that I had that shows how we can add some trips to Weston Point and not overload their streets, and we'd like to do that. This is really a very low threshold. Most jurisdictions get worried when you hit 1,500 and then get alarmed when you hit 2,000 vehicle trips on a local street. As a former ACHD planner, I've had some experience dealing with those kinds of thresholds. So what we're proposing to do is stay within that, below that 1,000 trip generation threshold and still build 4 to 5 structures. The TIS does anticipate running a portion of the trips. It's, I think on page 8 of the traffic impact study, there's a discussion about the fact that about 124 units would not overload Weston Point and would be an appropriate number to start with. Obviously, once the Buxton parcel is in play, their application submitted, process approved, we can have conversations about where to locate a public street access to the north, and that's fine. We have no information from them at this time. Connectivity and interconnectivity are standard, expected, universally accepted concepts in transportation planning. So enclaving is never a good idea. Again, I'm going to repeat this multiple times. We don't plan on running all of those trips down to the south, just a portion that's respectful of the 1,000 vehicle trip threshold. We don't have any public street frontage except for the extension of Calm Avenue, which we do depict as going straight north and connecting with the Buxton parcel. Other than that, we have no public street frontage. So we'd like to use an alternative method in PUD with a subdivision plat to use those smaller lots. We call it the shoestring, which is that driveway section that goes up the Laster Lane. That is sufficient for emergency services. As I'm sure you're aware, the International Fire Code requires that once you hit 30 units, you have to have 2 access points. When our access is more refined with the development of Buxton, we're going to turn that into a linear dog park. So you let your dog loose on one end and they run to the other end and back. So we were very excited about that idea. Put some benches in so dog owners can sit and watch their dogs run off their energy. But for the interim, it's a great place to locate an emergency access. We've met with Pioneer Irrigation District. I've corresponded, with the Black Canyon Irrigation District with regard to their easement requirements along the south boundary. Like I mentioned, we have our geotech report is done, water monitoring has been done, all the preliminary engineering drawings have been completed. So we presented staff, I think, with a very comprehensive and complete packet for this project. So what I'm asking for this evening on behalf of the applicants is that we receive approval to move forward. I would be happy to prepare a phasing plan to attach to the application materials for when it goes forward to city council for whatever portion they are going to be making a decision about, that just specifically delineates what the initial build-out is intended to be and what are the necessary conditions to complete build-out of the site. We can get that done. That's not a problem. Again, access to Calm Avenue, not to exceed 500 to 600 vehicle trips a day, for 4 to 5 buildings, and then distribute them between the 2 access points. Platting the site, we'd like to do as a part of a future application for the PUD, and this supports the high-density residential land use designation that is depicted on the city of Caldwell's future land use map. There has to be interim life safety access from the north, as I've already discussed, through the existing driveways. In the future, when 2 other accesses are available to comply with the International Fire Code, the applicant would be more than happy to convert Calm Avenue to an emergency access only. So it would be bollard at that point, and we have other access. The site plan does depict an access already to the Buxton parcel, about where the yellow lettering is on that exhibit that you have in front of you. So we anticipated connecting with them in the future, but they had an application that was just days away from a hearing, and they withdrew it, and they're starting over again. So there's a lot of complexity with that site that's going to take a while for them to vet, and we'd like to move forward with some of the buildings in the interim. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I think it's going to be for testimony. You're referring to a future PUD. You envision a scenario where annexation is granted with a limited development, or annexation granted with condition that a PUD is executed.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your statement?
The PUD and the subdivision plat both.
The importance of the phasing plan becomes paramount at that time, and we don't have a phasing plan in this application. Okay, you consider that part of proposed PUD?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you posited an alternative, which is saying that 3 or 4 buildings outside being allowed, holding on the rest until there is interconnection with plaster. Is that your proposal?
That is correct.
And what is that number? 3 buildings, 4 buildings?
4 to 5 buildings. I think it's 5 buildings. We still don't reach that 1,000 vehicle trips per day. We'd be happy to refine that with the engineering department to make sure that we stay below that threshold. 4 to 5 buildings, I guess, is the sweet spot that we're looking at.
Just to be clear, I don't think the city's position is ever to deny access to the south. It just as a minor component of interconnection, and that was the least desirable outcome developer's, proposal. Okay, we're also talking in terms of, should the annexation be allowed, would there be a PUD and a subdivision plat? Both is part of that development agreement.
And I'm not sure I'm 100% clear, so let me see if I can encapsulate that, recap it back to you. So you're anticipating doing a development agreement as a part of an annexation application that would be processed at the time of PUD and subdivision plat are submitted?
Well, the annexation would necessarily occur first, and then, but with the conditions of PUD and SUD being executed.
That would be fine. Development agreements are very useful.
Okay, I have no further questions. I'd like to, have the other testimony, and we'll come back to you in rebuttal.
Thank you.
And have a discussion. Thank you, Melanie. See, I've got, Gerald Langston. Mr. Langston?
I don't know if I signed up to testify. I just signed up in favor of the project, so I wasn't sure if you required testimony.
So, you didn't wish to speak, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, those we have signed up for, a neutral testimony, Christine Walker.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Your name and address, please.
I'm sorry?
Your name and address, please.
Christina Walker, 4419 Newbridge Street, Caldwell, 83607. And, originally I was pretty neutral on the idea. I understand fully that more housing is needed, and, I wasn't especially concerned that that housing would be, so close to my own home, understanding that, unfortunately, that is a available legal option. So, but as the discussion has continued, I've become much more concerned, especially, and I'm sorry, her name is Penelope, but I didn't catch her last name, so I don't mean to be rude by calling you. Okay, sorry about that. So as Penelope was discussing this, she kept discussing, her concerns about this being landlocked or encapsulated. And yet as I look at it, really I don't see how any part of this has taken into account the areas and communities around this subdivision. For example, even if the buildings to the southern end of the development were flipped the other direction, I think it would cause a lot less visual noise and just closeness, proximity to the houses around it. But that's not the case. It sounds like that really no ideas or thoughts, there's no sharing of any of this with the communities around this proposed area prior to this point. I'm guessing certainly not with Western Point, which is the area in which this traffic is to be funneled. I'm guessing that because our annual HOA meeting is also tonight, and I feel that if they've been informed in a more complete way, that likely that would not be the case. So originally, my intent was to come up and ask, so I understand from this proposer's point of view, this is about money, and fair enough. But what I was gonna ask was, how will you maintain the integrity of the existing communities? They've clearly put a lot of thought and care into the community that they are proposing without any such care or thought into the community surrounding, up to and including suggesting that the traffic, that 4 buildings or 5, but certainly not 12, even though there's gonna be 12 buildings, is gonna go through an existing subdivision. And I will say that the way the subdivision, the Western Point subdivision is laid out, essentially it becomes its own cul-de-sac at the end. And in that cul-de-sac, we have, families who've moved in specifically so their children can play in that area. I have a neighbor who moved in just a couple of weeks ago with her 2 sons, and she was most excited about all the children that play in that New Bridge Street and up the side streets just a little, where there's virtually no traffic at this time. The only traffic in those homes are the ones that live back there, so it's very, very limited. And I'll tell you what my home, which again is on New Bridge Street, and backs against the canal, so it's incredibly close to those very large multi-unit buildings. We've had horses in that field, we've had cows in that field, we have foxes back there right now, we have large birds of prey, we have rock chucks, I guess, to feed the large birds of prey. We have all kinds of birds. We have a cat colony. When I go out in my backyard that I purchased for this reason, I have a canal, and in the city, a little oasis of calm and peace and quiet, and this will obviously greatly negatively impact those things. Also, I'd like to hear more about how Penelope knows more about what the school can and cannot handle than the school itself in their written document. And also how, again, the 12-unit complex will really just be 4 or 5 units for us to worry about traffic going through, when obviously the intent is to build 12 units. I also am a little distressed that we're proposing that 288 units be built without any real final plan for additional entrance and egress. So far we have one way, and that's by my house. We have thoughts about potential other ways, but none of that to this point is confirmed. I'd also like to talk about irrigation. I understand some studies have been done, but irrigation has been limited. The start of irrigation season, as I call it, has been delayed, and the conclusion of irrigation season has been moved up, I think likely to the additional usage, and that's before this is built. Not sure if they're planning on using city water or irrigation water, so that's a question that I have. Also, again, my concern is that there's no integration. The integration seems to be traffic through my neighborhood. It doesn't seem to be any care or concern to the negative impacts of 288 additional families traveling through my neighborhood, using the water, using the schools, and the noise and other issues that are bound to come up with that large number. And that's only part of it. Obviously, we have this much larger area that will eventually also be subject to very similar concerns. So I'm thinking a little further in the future than this project and its profitability. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, appreciate it. Next we have Bonnie Layton. Ms. Layton, please.
Good evening,
evening, Mr. Eggleston. My name is Bonnie Layton. I reside at 3631 South Pheasant Tail Way in Boise, Idaho, 83617. And I am actually the owner of the large parcel to the northeast of this project. And earlier today, I submitted a letter to staff, which I believe you have a copy. And if I may, I'd like to read it into the record as opposed, just to keep me kind of on task on some of the comments that we had regarding this project. And so I addressed it to Mr. Jones. I reviewed the staff report as well as all of the application documents over the weekend in order to write this letter today. So with that, I'm writing in regarding the above referenced application as the owner of the 40-acre parcel to the northeast of this project. Again, that address is 4107 Laster Lane, referred to in the application documents as the Buxton site. I've reviewed the application documents as well as the staff report and would like to provide the following comments for consideration. As previously mentioned in my email dated May 5th to Mr. Jones, I initially reviewed the roundtable notes and the application documents for the project, and that review raised significant concerns with the application itself, with what the applicant is proposing, and the potential significant negative impacts to my property. It also appeared that the application was incomplete, and it did not address several issues specifically raised at the roundtable meeting, which was held over a year ago. I have since had the opportunity to review the staff report issued on Friday, May 6th. Upon review of the staff report, I'm pleased to see that engineering staff has addressed several of the issues and concerns left unanswered and unresolved in the application. I appreciate and support the engineering department's comments that staff has acknowledged that Lavender Crossing must be a development that can stand on its own, and that the applicant needs to work out any impacts to my property, or anyone else's for that matter. That said, I would like to provide 3 main points for clarification. Number 1, regarding the rights-of-way comment on page 4 of the staff report, I would like to clarify that the extension of Laster Lane to the east, the 90-degree intersection required, and the 53-foot right-of-way dedication all require ground not owned by the applicant. A private road from Laster Lane instead of a 53-foot right-of-way would help lessen the impact to my parcel. However, there would still be an impact and loss of private property. Once this connection is developed, there appears to be no reason that this connection to Laster would only be used for emergency vehicle accesses, as stated in 2.4 on page 2 of the staff report. Number 2, the applicant's letter to the city is requesting access through my property. Again, this project must stand on its own and not rely on adjacent property owners to make their proposed project comply with city codes and safety standards. Traffic mitigation comment number 1 on page 5 of the staff report mentions cross-access easements, and in recent discussions with city engineer Rob McDonald, who's here this evening, these access easements can be for emergency vehicle access only. Number 3, in my letter, the irrigation comment number 10 on page 8 of the staff report appropriately discusses the relocation of the Highline Canal as the responsibility of this applicant for the extension of Laster Lane, and to develop adequate pressurized irrigation to serve the project. As mentioned above, the Laster Lane extension and Highline Canal relocation both impact my property. However, we're willing to discuss a mutually acceptable solution. Overall, I agree with staff's comments and conditions provided by the engineering department in the staff report, including the applicant's responsibility to bring water and sewer from the west in Laster Lane to serve Lavender Crossing. My partners and I are willing to discuss with the applicant the appropriate allocation and potentially shared costs, and believe that this is an appropriate and reasonable course of action. and if I may, just a few more minutes here. Listening to staff comments this evening, as well as the applicant's presentation, you know, unfortunately, there were some hard copies that were handed out tonight that I didn't have a good chance to review, that were kind of late submittal. So just not sure what all are in those documents. And then just looking through the staff report, trying to clarify, there were some comments that, you know, about the buildings and placements of balconies, and looking at the floor plans of the submittal versus a statement that was in the letter of application. It looks like there's some discrepancy there. This parcel is not landlocked. In looking at the application documents, Ms. Constagus had prepared a memo from the roundtable meeting over a year ago. And at that time, back in March or February of 2001, staff had identified that if she wanted to exceed 100 units, that she needed to secure a second access point. So there are options for the development of this site that would be appropriate with what the site is able to provide for development at this time. I'd also like to say that they have not reached out to us. Ms. Davis has said that we don't know what they're doing. They've made no effort in the staff report, in the memo from the roundtable. That was something that was suggested. I have not heard from the applicant personally. The access point to Laster Lane location. As I mentioned, we are willing to try to work with the applicant to provide something, but we really would like to make sure that it minimizes the impact to my property, you know. And so, Rob, I don't know, I think staff did a really good job of evaluating that in the staff report. The extension of Laster Lane to the east would require relocation of the Highline Canal at the same time. So when Rob mentioned that there are some complexities with the site, yes, there are. Should the applicant even want to take access off of Laster right now, it's very marginal at best for the proposed development, and would require coordination, but we have not heard from them. Let's see. I think, you know, at this time that, you know, I think at this time those are majority of my comments and concerns. I ask that you consider staff comments and, again, make those, if you choose to consider approval of this project, that there are some significant conditions of approval placed on this project that will minimize the impacts for all of the property owners in the area, not just myself, but there's some significant impacts to my property specifically. I believe what the staff was requiring of the applicant are standard development conditions. There are similar applications that have gone before the city of Caldwell, where if an applicant is proposing a density of a certain nature, that the onus is on that developer to resolve those issues, or, as we've heard from staff, you know, come back with a plan that can accommodate what the existing conditions are to minimize the impacts to the adjacent folks. With that, I can stand for any questions, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Layton. I have no questions, but I do appreciate your testimony, your showing up tonight and elucidating the viewpoint of the adjoining landowner. And I thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will mention a letter that you wrote is entered in Exhibit ANN 22-3, number 1. And with that, the next person who signed up in opposition is Ralph C. New. wish to speak? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I live at 4914 Ormsby Avenue, Caldwell, 83607.
Well, thank you.
And my main concern is if you push all that traffic up the Lassiter to the west, Lassiter, you know, won't handle that much traffic. It's, bad enough now with just, you know, Ormsby and Weston Point, or Weston Street, excuse me. And out at Lake, it's terrible in the morning. You know, getting on the lake, you wanna go, west, you know, the intersection, you know, they'd have to do something with that. And improve Lassiter from all the way across. And, if you send them down through that other development on Lansdowne, you know, how are you gonna determine which street they're gonna go down? They may all go down the same street. So, I think it should be held up till they, you know, can go, you know, across to the boulevard on Lassiter, you know, and get, because you're gonna have like 400 cars extra, at least, on 288 units. So, I'm just, at this time, you know, they need to do some, improvements on how they're gonna get in and out of there. That's my comment.
Thank you very much. It's a further comment. I appreciate your testimony.
Okay.
Next person I have signed up in opposition of Bonnie New.
Well, yeah, but.
You want to speak, he said your name. Oh, no.
You weren't doing it.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Ramsey Boutrous, please.
Yeah.
My name is Ramsey Boutros, 1116 Winella Drive, Caldwell, 83605. I'm speaking today on the application for the subdivision and annexation of Lavender Crossing Apartments. As you know, the staff report includes correspondence from the Valley View School District explicitly stating they cannot accommodate any more students in the schools which children from the Lavender Crossing Apartments would attend, even in portables, which are maxed out. It is also public knowledge that Valley View School District put a bond for 2 new elementary schools before voters in their district, and the bond failed. This means that Valley View has no way to publicly fund any new schools. I was witness to a different development application that came before the Planning and Zoning Commission recently, and which had a similar letter from the Valley View School District. That application was allowed to go before the City Council. 2 council members mentioned the problem with Valley View, and instead of acknowledging the severity of the problem by denying or postponing the application, they approved it. The City Council did not offer any solutions on where children would be taken, and the letter from Valley View made it clear that the school district had no options. More recently, 2 applications were heard where both impacted Valley View. Both included correspondence from Valley View stating their opposition to the developments on the basis that they cannot accommodate more students. In both these more recent applications, Valley View sent a representative to the hearings who expressed appreciation for the developer working with the school district and describing the financial contributions each promised. In one case, the developer offered to pay Valley View $2,000 per housing unit, and in the other case, they offered $500 per housing unit. In total, the donated monies would not even have paid for 1 portable for elementary schools that the district said have no more room even for portables. This arrangement was greeted with approval by both the Valley View representative and by planning and zoning. While it is true that anything is better than nothing, it is also true that these efforts only pay lip service to the massive problems the Valley View School District faces. In both cases, Valley View's representative described how past total failure to consider the school district resulted in developments being approved with no accommodation for the school district's needs. So, he was grateful for what little the school district got. But the city and Valley View need to do better than just paying lip service to the school district's severe problems and expressing gratitude for small sums. To be clear, school districts must allow children in their district to enroll. If a school is over the legal occupancy number, the school district cannot allow additional occupants for their own safety. This leaves a school district with limited choices: breaking the law by refusing to enroll students, breaking the law by allowing more students than legal occupancy allowed, or allowing enrollment and leaving the children in the parking lot on buses. None of these choices are acceptable, and the city of Caldwell should not be complicit in forcing these conditions. Small payments by developers that do nothing to actually solve the problem are not the correct solution. The city, planning and zoning, and Valley View need to treat this problem with the seriousness it deserves. Approval of developments must be linked to the provision of educational facilities that will accommodate students. The property rights of the developers do not supersede the rights of existing property owners who don't want to pay massive new taxes to subsidize developments. This means that when a tipping point is reached on educational facility capacity, as it has, no further developments can be approved in that school district. Let me add a marginal note from the Valley View letter. The superintendent mentions 16 new developments that have already been approved that will result in 4,000 new houses. And as I said earlier, there is no way for them to build facilities for the new students. The fluctuation may occur, but this is a massive undercapacity problem that the school district has. Sorry. Concurrent development with funded capacity expansion is acceptable as long as the facilities are completed and ready to accept students when the development is ready to be occupied. Since, as a private citizen, I get one chance to speak at a hearing, I want to make some additional points. When I asked the P&Z Commission about their responsibility regarding school overloading, they replied that it is not their problem. I believe this is incorrect, as there is a responsibility to do planning. Refusing to plan is an irresponsible position to take. It is clear that the City Council also doesn't think it is their problem. The evidence is their voting record. This means the responsible buck stops here with you. I have heard many applicants come before the P&Z Commission and the City Council. All say that they are good neighbors. If they were good neighbors, they would take the school issue seriously and not just arm wave through it by saying they are happy to work with the school district. Applicants need to provide land and funds to build schools, or they need to be prepared to wait to develop until such time as school funding is in place, and there will be a place for children to attend school when they are living in the subdivision. The failure of the applicants to make firm commitments to providing land and funds for schools implies that they are hoping to place the cost of building schools on the existing taxpayers, an approach that the voters just rejected for Valley View. It is in a time when the school district cannot build new schools, The only practical solution is for applicants to provide land and funds for building schools. Without that firm condition for approval, this and all future applications that impact Valley View School District should be denied. I stand for questions.
I have no questions, but I appreciate the testimony, Mr. Buttress, and, I think it's very pertinent to this application and anything else that's upcoming in the Valley View School District. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to sign up, but we have Clint Hamblin. Mr. Hamblin?
Thank you so much for your time. So, my name is Clint Hamblin. I live at 4301 Newbridge Street, Caldwell, Idaho, 83607. So I actually live on the corner of Lansdowne and Newbridge, right next to the common area, be to the south of the proposed apartments. My first concern I have is obviously the entrance that they would be using, Colm Avenue. Our street is nice and quiet right now, as this nice woman pointed out. Right before I came here today, I was on the street with my two sons and my neighbor who came with me, his son, and we were playing basketball on the street. We might have had one car pass us, and it was safe. If Colm Avenue becomes the main entrance, or even a partial entrance and exit, that traffic is going to be increased. And if you drive through that neighborhood, you see basketball hoops everywhere. On Lansdowne, on Hargrove, and on Newbridge. Today, I noticed kids getting home from school, and there were at least 15 kids on bikes today. And parents aren't going to let that happen if this thing opens up, because think about the speeding and the amount of traffic, and the traffic impact study by 2025 mentioned 866 additional vehicles on Lansdowne and 1,714 extra on Hargrove, and that's just not possible in our little subdivision. The other question was, we were talking about having another access up north on Laster Lane. Well, if there's two access points and two exits, what's controlling them from going up to Laster? Because if you go south, it's significantly faster to get to the freeway. So you're not going to be able to control which exit people use. So when they say, oh, it'll limit it some, it won't limit it that much. The other issue I have is, I don't know if we can pull it up there. She put up a plan, had the apartments, actually, yeah, that one. So she mentioned to the west about really accommodating those houses. Well, if you look to the south, I noticed that the picture doesn't show my house or her house or any of the houses that are right next to that canal, and the amount of privacy that we'd completely lose. My house is on the corner, right there. So basically, those two buildings to the south would be looking directly down into my backyard. So my kids, wife, no privacy. I don't know if it's good. I know when I moved in, I thought there might be houses built back there, and that's a completely different thing, but now the privacy's gone. And what are we gonna do about that? Is there something gonna be put up? Because it looks like it's directly on the canal. And I don't think anyone to the south was thought of in this plan. Because the only thing I'm gonna look at is the building out my back door, my backyard. So that's pretty much all I've got. My main concern though is, I have a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 7-year-old. They love being able to go out and play. They have the basketball hoop, they play baseball in the common area. Our kids are playing together. other kids from the neighborhood. The woman who just moved in, I met her son and his best friend who lives on the street behind him. And they're all playing in that common area, riding their bikes. Well, no parent is gonna wanna let their kids ride their bikes, knowing how many extra cars are gonna be coming through our neighborhood. And we moved there in August, and we love the neighborhood. We love the privacy. We love being able to have our kids go out in the front and play with the other kids and enjoy the neighborhood. And I just feel like those apartments go up, we've lost our privacy, we've lost, like she said, the view. My kids love going out there, they look at that horse every day. They nicknamed him Stars, because if you look in the distance, you see a giant flag at Gander RV. And they named him Stars, well, actually, they named both horses Stars and Stripes. Stripes has disappeared, I don't know what happened to Stripes, but Stars is still there. So the kid even named him after the flag in the back, and it's just, I don't wanna lose what we've got here, and this project scares me, so that's all I've got, if you have anything.
Hey, Christian Hamlin, made some good points, appreciate your testimony.
No problem, thank you.
Next, we have, Hamday, Mr. Hamday.
I'm good, I think I'll probably just be repeating everything everybody else said, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, construction.
All right, then, if you don't testify, we'll, end, this portion of it. What I'd like to do is have a conversation with the staff, and then we'll, offer rebuttal time, to the applicant. Mr. Jones, the applicant, made, at least two distinct, propositions, to change the nature of the application. Will those be to go ahead and annex and then initiate a process of a PUD application to cover the whole site and a subsequent, subdivision application to fulfill the requirements of that. The other is to essentially look at today's application, approve a part of that, let's say phase 1, 4 or 5 of the buildings, and limit, or make that the limit until the issues that we've discussed have been presented. I guess there's a question there somewhere, but with the process, speaking just of the legal notifications and publications and announcements and so forth, your opinion, do we have the option at this point to diverge to either of those, we'll call them Plan A and B, that diverge from the application in front of us tonight?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, staff would not recommend approving annexation with not having a plan available to us at this time. We would like to have a plan in front of us for the annexation to go along with it. We don't want to annex the land and then not have an idea of what would go in there, because then anything could change. The second option, I don't fully understand. Was your question as if we could proceed with this but just limit it to 4 or 5 buildings?
Yes, the R3 zoning annexation 4 or 5, phase 1. That's not, but that's a different plan that we have in front of us right now. That has not been advertised before the public, correct?
Correct.
And it would be tough to move on something like that without going through the process.
It seems more that the applicant, sounds more that they want to go towards the PUD subdivision route, which would require a different application, of course.
So we have essentially, the application for us and then, two alternatives posited by the applicant, and none of which seem to be complete and just procedurally, properly before the community, the public, and I would agree to diverge from the current application in front of us tonight would require, a whole new, set of notifications, plans, a second hearing, and so on and so forth. I don't think, we have the ability to move in that direction. I concur with that. This question, I think I'd like to ask Ms. Root, as far as the, potential actions for this body. In the staff report, and the other staff reports, it says that the hearings examiner has the opportunity to either recommend approval or denial. And I assume that's statute, is that correct?
Yes, it can be approval, denial, or a, continuance from this standpoint.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, I understand the process. I also, you know, really, grateful for everybody who's testified tonight that brought in, different, aspects of this, and, particularly, Ms. Tyler, the adjoining landowner, is not ready to develop that land and be, would perhaps, come to some kind of agreement with the applicant, but that has not been approached as such, so we don't have an imminent, agreement between the adjacent landowners that would, presumably allow for the, full development of Lassiter, connection into a public right-of-way at the current standards. Is that correct?
That is correct, and, that is Ms. Layton, not Ms. Tyler.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And,
Ms. Layton, I apologize.
you have yet to provide Ms. Constantine a rebuttal period.
Sorry, what was that?
You have not provided for, planning a rebuttal period.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not ready to close the hearing. I just wanted to get these points on the table. And, let's see. Excuse me. Mr. Jones, did the applicant, breach the sort of the phasing plan? Or do you have any records of that, of a proposed phasing, until, let's say, the interconnect would be made with Lassiter or some other solution?
A phasing plan was, I do not recollect a phasing plan. It might have been slightly discussed during a phone call, but I was going off the narrative, which does not discuss any sort of phasing plan.
Thank you. Yeah, so that is a new approach, suggested by the applicant this time. With that, I would like to, offer the applicant a chance for rebuttal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Do you need me to give you my address again?
Please.
Post Office Box 405, Boise, Idaho, 83701. We submitted 32 separate documents with our application that included elevations, north, south, east, and west, materials, floor plans. We had landscape plans, open space exhibit, renderings, preliminary site and utility plans. There were 32 documents that were submitted with this application. So if they weren't available for viewing, that isn't something that I can necessarily have any control of. I mean, I'm sorry if people couldn't get to them, but we did submit a substantial amount of material, both in hard copy and electronically. So full-size drawings, we did submit quite a bit of material. I sent out 120 neighborhood meeting notices, as specified by the Caldwell City Code, and one individual came to that neighborhood meeting. So if there are concerns about neighbors not being informed of what is being proposed, I can't do anything besides send them a notice, rent a room at the public library, and stand around for an hour because nobody came. I had all kinds of exhibits, everything that anyone would have possibly been interested in looking at was available for anyone who wanted to come to that meeting. So I just think it's important to understand that there's two levels of responsibility. I need to make myself available, and people need to take advantage of my availability. If someone chooses not to come to the neighborhood meeting, that's a choice that they've made. And I would have been happy to discuss anything with them that they wanted to talk about. I was there available to answer questions. The Notice Canal, which runs along the south boundary of the site, there's a 75-foot wide separation between the macro path and the south or the north property lines of those adjacent residences, which is pretty much what a standard lot width would be. So it's not like those buildings are going to be right up against the property line. There is quite a bit of separation. As I mentioned previously, there's no intention of running the entire development through Calm Avenue and down through this subdivision. That substreet is fully constructed, and it has been there since the site development was done. So it's been there. And again, I understand their concerns, but if you drive by a substreet on a daily basis and you don't notice it, that's probably, it's logical to assume if there's a substreet there that there might be something that's going to be happening to the north. Let's see, lots of comments. I have not seen the letter that was submitted by Ms. Layton on May 5th. Is that letter available on the website or in the application materials? I mean, I haven't seen it. I would like to have seen it, but that's fine. I can catch up and take a look at that later.
That's from yesterday.
I did check my email numerous times today to make sure that if there was anything new, that I would be apprised of it. There's some, I don't know what unresolved items Ms. Layton is speaking of. Again, 32 documents, along with preliminary irrigation, preliminary sewer and water, preliminary fire, and everything that you would need with the preliminary plat application was essentially submitted with the annexation zoning and special use permit application. So I don't know what items she would be referring to. I'd be happy to visit with her about it, if that's a possibility. In terms of impacts to her property, I'm not sure that what she's planning on developing on her site will be much different than what we're proposing now. The original development plan was conceptual in nature for the application that was submitted last year, but it included quite a bit of residential, townhouses, apartment buildings, And, there was originally proposed an assisted living facility. I believe that's what it was on the site as well. So there might be some commercial elements that will be included in the Buxton parcel development plan, but it will be more than likely predominantly residential. I don't know that for sure, but it stands to reason that that's what was conceptually, presented previously. So with that, you know, we've got quite a bit of separation to the south. There is a well on the site that could be used for additional irrigation water. Pioneer Irrigation District didn't indicate any problems with water supply. As you know, your water rights, your surface water rights are dedicated to the irrigation district, and they distribute through a pump station. I did the Sagewood Senior Living Facility on the other side of the Elijah Drain when I worked for Community Development Inc. here in Caldwell, and there's a giant pump station there that I had to upgrade with a new pump, because we were adding additional, service on the pump. So, again, I heard nothing from the irrigation district about water problems or a lack of water availability. I don't think irrigation is gonna be a problem. You know, I'm looking at all my notes here, there's just a lot here. The relocation of the Highline Canal, that's something that has to be coordinated through the irrigation district. When we met with the irrigation district, they didn't bring it up. It stands to reason that it needs to be relocated. Those kinds of things end up being cooperative efforts between developers and the irrigation district. There's a meeting at the irrigation district office, we talk about it, figure out who's responsible for what, and then it gets done. It's not shouldn't be a failed element for either parcel. It's just something that has to happen, a normal course of development. Sharing the cost of extension of sewer and water. Public street that extends from this site to the north. Again, in 25 years of land planning in the Treasure Valley, streets have to be built. Access sometimes has to be provided to adjacent parcels. Again, these are normal course of event land development items that happen all the time. You have to substreet to somebody else, you lose 3 building lots. It's just what happens. You have to provide access to adjacent parcels. It's a cost of development. It's a normal occurrence. Again, I'm not sure if that's a deal breaker or not, or if it should be a deal breaker. In terms of Laster Lane is classified according to the Compass map as a collector street, which means it's intended to carry higher traffic. If I remember from looking at the TIS, the traffic counts at the intersection of Laster and Lake were pretty low. So, you know, if a signal is warranted or more stop signs, that's fine. That's a cost of development that my applicant will have to deal with as well as anyone else. If it's a problem, there's some mitigation that needs to be done. It's a normal course of development. With regard to the correspondence from the school district and the first person who came and testified about my level of knowledge in making representations about the school district, I didn't make any representations about the school district. I simply stated that I went to the State Board of Education website and looked at the numbers that are available there as reported by the Valley View School District for the different types of schools and did some simple statistical analysis on them. That's all. Just to look and see what was happening. Their problem is with high schools. Their biggest problem is with their high schools, not with elementary and middle schools. In terms of their enrollment, the 21 students per classroom, according to the State Board of Education, is a recommendation. It's not a mandate. So what their student body counts are in the individual classrooms, I can't speak to that. The problem with Valley View is their high school. They're over capacity, clearly. How to handle that, I don't know what the answer is to that. I just don't know. I'd like to move forward with this application. A subdivision was not required It's not required by code. What we submitted and what we requested is consistent with what's permitted by the city of Caldwell planning. I understand that the subdivision and PUD is a great idea. We make it a condition of approval to move forward with building permits or whatever. It can be a condition of approval. It doesn't have to stop the process. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I think, Sylvia, I do not have any further questions. I think you covered it. And, with that, I'd like to close the testimony. First, I do have an exhibit from Mr. Boutros, which he read into the testimony in the labeled ANN 21-3, number 3. And one other piece from Christine Walker, an email received, which I labeled ANN 22-3, number 2, which reflects some of the topics of her public testimony tonight. So we have 3 exhibits in addition to the staff report. So we have a recommendation or an application for annexation and a special use permit for a rather sizable development. And there are issues here, most specifically to planning aspects of the ingress, egress, the interconnect, having to do with accessing through an existing neighborhood and trying to find another ingress, egress point that at this point does not exist. That is an almost insurmountable issue, and my way of thinking in technical aspects have to do with the comprehensive plan must be satisfied on the counts of the kind of impacts that a proposal would have in transportation, but also in the other issues brought up. I am very concerned about the issues of Valley View School District. I mentioned that earlier. We have this discussion with each application, or have had essentially in the last year, and the citizens of Canyon County did not approve the school bond, and that leaves the school district without the means to service its own district. That's a problem that we can't fix here, but we can certainly acknowledge that there needs to be efforts in that from the city and all the citizens of Canyon County, particularly those in the Valley View School District. If they want their children educated, they need to step up. You can't necessarily build your way into prosperity. That's never been the case, and with typically just a straight residential development, it doesn't pay for its way in the community. It's being subsidized by the higher density developments in commercial uses, industrial uses, agricultural uses. And that's somewhat of the irony here that the single-family detached dwellings typically in all the planning studies I've seen are essentially being subsidized through tax dollars of others, based mainly on the transportation costs to service single-family dwellings versus other type of land uses. And that's pertinent here that we are back to the transportation issue, which can only be solved by the current applicant in the context of their own proposal. The applicant has provided 2 two other alternatives in addition to the full development alternative in front of us, being, approve the annexation with a partial development, 4 or 5 units, then wait and see if the, access and interconnection with Lasser materializes in forming a phasing plan based on that eventuality. The other is basically to start over with the annexation and go forward with a planned unit development application, which is not part of this application. It would be a new round, and give them a different phasing process, something that's not before us right now. And so the way I look at it, we have an application that, bottom line is just not right. The components are not there to support the full dimension, the 200 plus units in this application. And to address some of the alternatives presented by the applicant, in my opinion, requires a restart on the process. We can't redesign during the hearing an application. It has to stand on the merits that went before the public, and the public has had a chance to review and comment on. And so that's the world, the realm that we're dealing with, the application before us. And I'll make my recommendations based on that alone. In the comprehensive plan analysis for the annexation, the staff reported contains several policies that substantiate that the application is not fulfilled and fully comply or consistent with the comprehensive plan. I would like to add, in addition to those policies found on page 9, policy from the transportation chapter 9 section of the comprehensive plan, chapter 9, goal 1, policy 1-4, that addresses the issue of interconnection through neighborhoods. This application is not consistent with that policy. Also, in the same hand, in the land use chapter, goal 1, in policy 1-1, addresses a similar issue, and directing consistency of those policies. It has not been found consistent with this application. The staff report, the policies I have cited here point to the fact that this application is not to be found fully consistent with the comprehensive plan in aspects of the annexation, as far as the annexation is concerned. The findings of facts, looking at page 9, Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. And the conclusions of law annexation on page 10. The Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case and recommend it to the mayor and city council that it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met, and the hearing was conducted within the guidelines of applicable Idaho code and city ordinances. and the recommendation to the city council, based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby recommends to the Huron City Council that case number ANN 22-000003, a request by Penelope Konstantinakis, to annex approximately 14.03 acres with an R3 high-density residential zone for parcels R3247801 and R32487 in Caldwell, Idaho, is denied with the following, or is denied, period. And, with the denial recommendation, the annexation, that, precludes, the, approval of the, special use permit. We will go through the analysis of that. That the, hearing examiner accepts the comprehensive plan components as listed below for the special use permit. The request is found to be inconsistent with the following comprehensive plan components. And, in the staff report on page 10 was, land use goal 1, policy 1-1, land use goal 3, policy 3-2, transportation, goals and policies, goal 1, policy 1-4, to substantiate that, this application is inconsistent in terms of, a special use permit. The findings of facts, Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, the evidence list, all adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The proposed use is conditionally permitted by the terms of the ordinance and subject to conditions of approval. In conclusion, the law for the special use permit, the Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case and whether it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met and the hearing was conducted within the guidelines of applicable Idaho code and city ordinances. The order of decision, the special use permit based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby orders that case number SUP 22-000001, request by Penelope Konstantinakis, I'm sorry about that, to construct a 12-apartment building with 288 residential units on parcels 3247801 and R32487 in Caldwell, Idaho, is denied. Period. And with that, we'll end the hearing. Thank you very much for your participation.
She's gonna have a meeting on the 18th. What? The body's gonna have a meeting.
I'm having a meeting on the 18th. I don't know if you guys are going to
Goodbye.
There we go. Read the next action item, number 4, ANN 22-1/PUD 22-1, SUD 22-5. A request by Hayden Homes to annex 60.24 acres on an R1 low-density residential, designated low-density residential in the comprehensive plan. And with that, I'd like to turn the time over to staff to make the presentation on this, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Tonight, staff is asking for the consideration for annexation of 60.24 acres off of Lincoln Road, Emma Hill, Associate Planner, 61 Cleveland Boulevard. The applicant is requesting with an R1 zone, and it is consistent with adjacent properties and. Sorry about that. The applicant is also requesting the approval of a planned unit development and a preliminary plat for the subdivision of Huntington Ridge East. The proposed development will include 224 total lots with 188 buildable lots and 36 common lots, and is subjected to a development agreement as well. With the approval of the PUD, the minimum lot, or the average lot size will be 6,595 square feet, and there is a 12.45% qualifying open space proposed as well. The parcel is adjacent to the, development Huntington Ridge West, which was recommended for approval by City Council earlier this year in the lower hearing bodies. The development is shown to be consistent with 2 or more of the PUD requirements. It includes both attached homes with multiple housing types. The development also provides a layout that preserves the topography and geography of the area by creating an 8-foot pathway along the Mason Creek. This parcel is constrained by the Mason Creek and is also within the FEMA Special Flood Hazard Area. The proposed density is 3.14, which is slightly higher than 3 units per acre stated in the comprehensive plan. However, since it is a planned unit development, it can technically go up to 6 units per acre. The development is proposing multiple amenities, which include a pickleball court, a tot lot, a fishing pond, and a dock with over the fishing pond that is connected to a micro pathway, which is consistent with the PUD amenities that would need to be required. The developer is requesting some deviations to the zoning standards, which include a minimum lot size of 4,194 square feet with a minimum width of 40 feet. They are also requesting setbacks be reduced to 15 feet in the front and 18 feet with 20 feet and 23 feet on the garage side. I put that on the second slide, but yeah, so the zoning standard deviations are at the bottom, just in case I didn't say them correctly, because I messed them up on the first time. Staff has provided an analysis of the comprehensive plan for annexation as planned unit development and preliminary plat, and found it is consistent with many of the goals and policies of this plan, and staff is recommending the approval of annexation, PUD, and preliminary plat for Huntington Ridge East, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. There was one question, there's a letter representing one of the nearby landowners in the packet, referencing from Clark and Wardle law firm, dated February 2nd, 2022. They questioned the lack of a proposal to put Florida Avenue through to the north on the western boundary of this proposal. Could you address that a bit, or Rob, Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Rob McDonald, my work address of 621 Cleveland Boulevard. We have had, as you know, this development, Huntington Ridge East, is being developed by the same developer as Huntington Ridge West. we had this discussion when the hearing came through for Huntington Ridge West about the Florida Avenue extension and the obstructions that were present for that. The options came down to either not building the road at all and allowing the developer to continue a development without any improvements of Florida Avenue, or to shift the alignment of Florida Avenue to the east, which is part of this Huntington Ridge East development. And so we, the city, felt like that was the better option than not building it at all. And so that was the decision made as part of that development. We wanted to make sure that before Huntington Ridge West went to City Council for final approval, that the obligation of Florida Avenue was met, the design and construction of that as a requirement. And so this development here, Huntington Ridge East, is proposing Florida Avenue through its development, which satisfies that requirement that the other development also had. Okay. So it was the Florida alignment, but it has a different name now, and I can't pronounce it. McCutcheon. So it is, though it is not called Florida Avenue, it still serves the same purpose as Florida Avenue would have served, and it is a collector road designation.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Just to clarify it, I don't know if we can see this on the map, but given, let's say, hypothetically, that Florida were to go through to the northern boundary of this proposed property, that still would not connect with the parcel of concern addressed by the letter from Clark Wardle. There's still an intervening property. Is that true?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, that is correct. But even if Florida was built on the original alignment, it too would not be able to connect through because of out parcels that were blocking the path. And so either way, there was no connection through. We felt like this at least enables us to require the developer to build the road, even though it's on a different alignment. At least we can have it built as part of the development.
Thank you. And then just to follow up on that, the current application really can't solve the issue addressed by the property addressed by World Clark, so-called Wander property. They still don't have contiguity to a right-of-way anywhere, and would still have to acquire additional properties to gain access. Is that correct?
That is correct, according to my understanding.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no further questions of staff. I would like to ask the applicant to make their presentation, please.
Good evening, Mr. Eggleston. My name is Tim Mockwell with Hayden Homes, 1406 North Main Street, Suite 109, Meridian, 83642. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm going to try to keep my initial comments brief to allow time for answering your questions and any neighborhood comments that might be needing some additional explanation. So, could I get my, there we go. First page, if you could. Oh. So, as staff mentioned, Huntington Ridge East is the application before you tonight. We're requesting annexation with an R1 zone and a PUD and preliminary plat for 188 buildable lots plus substantial common areas. The property is located on the north side of Lincoln Road. It wraps around the, I don't know if the pointer will work on that screen, but yeah, no. So the property wraps around the Mosaics public charter school. To the south is Van Buren Elementary. This is Huntington Ridge East, which is the subject of our applications tonight, including this piece here. Huntington Ridge West was an application that you heard a couple months back, and it was at your recommendations or your conditions of approval that Huntington Ridge West not go before city council until this project caught up. Hopefully with an approval here tonight, we could do that. The issue at hand was the, extension of Florida Avenue. I have got an exhibit I'll show you a little later that shows how Florida Avenue wraps through these subdivisions that have already been built out to the south. So there's really no northwest or north-south connection or extension of Florida Avenue possible. To put it on Lincoln Road now would be somewhat arbitrary because it doesn't connect to the south. From my communications with staff, my understanding was that they were looking for a north-south collector, regardless of whether it was an alignment with where Florida Avenue terminated at the south or to the east. So that's what we've done here. In fact, we've got two proposed collectors. One is through Huntington Ridge East. Excuse me, yeah, this is not gonna work. One is the extension that staff, Rob, just mentioned, and the other is a half of our Aviation Road extension. So this is an overview looking at the Huntington Ridge East subdivision. We're proposing, again, 188 buildable lots, 36 common area lots for 224 total. Our gross density is actually 3.12. Staff report mentions in multiple places 3.14, and I think that was our typo on this document here. That 3.14 was calculated based on 189 lots. One of your conditions also was that we include a stub street to our west boundary of this subdivision and the east boundary of Huntington Ridge West, so that if the property in between ever became available, at least those, the public right-of-way is there to connect these two subdivisions. So at 188 lots, the density is 3.12 units per acre. As staff mentioned, average residential size is just under 6,600 square feet. Our total open space is 17.66 acres, and our qualifying open space is 12.4. The PUD code requires a minimum of 10%, so we're, again, substantial common areas in this. So, as you know, Mr. Eggleston, the purpose of the PUD, or one of the components of the PUD, is it allows flexibility or relief through certain code items in exchange for amenities and other features that will offset or mitigate some of these requests. The flexibility that we're requesting with the PUD, there's three of them. We're requesting some substandard lot sizes compared to the R1 district. That would allow for our 40-foot wide product, which is ranging from just under 4,200 square feet to 4,600 square feet. We also have some lots proposed for in the, what we would consider our medium-sized product, two-car garage, single-story and two-story. We're also, the second item we're proposing is the setback reduction of 15 foot per rear and 5 foot interior side yards. And then lastly, the deviation of the R1, again, would be 3 units per acre. We're proposing 3.12. The PUD process would allow up to 6, so we're considerably below that. So the compensation that we're proposing with the Huntington Ridge East as part of the PUD, staff mentioned several of the amenities that we're proposing. I'd just like to run through. Some of these are things that are required, so I'm not gonna stand up here and say that we're giving certain things, but I just wanna point out what some of the benefits and some of the nice features of this subdivision are. We are proposing a staggered setback, front yard setback, to help mitigate the wall effect as you drive along a street or view the backs of homes. So as staff mentioned, our minimum to garage is 20 feet from back of sidewalk to face of garage. That will be 20 or 23 feet, alternating between odd and even lots. we're proposing the 15 and 18 feet to the livable space. So I just wanna make sure that's clear. We will have at least 20 feet from back of sidewalks. We're maintaining the Mason Creek creek throughout the property. That presented some real challenges with this project. 110 foot, I believe it is, easement. And so we're maintaining much of that, existing vegetation. We're gonna try to clean up some of the understory. We're proposing detached sidewalk along the Collector Road that Rob mentioned, McCutcheon Avenue. So detached sidewalk with planter strip along that collector. We're proposing wrought iron fencing along lots that are backing up to Mason Creek, as well as the pond and some of our larger common areas. We are proposing, and this is a code requirement, but we are incorporating off-street parking for some of the smaller cottage-style product. And then lastly is the open space. Again, 7.5 acres of qualified open space, 12.4%. So we're providing more than 1.5 acres more than what code requires of common area. As far as amenities go, we're providing a pickleball court and half-court basketball. We're providing a playground. One of our stormwater swales does not meet the qualified open space. Nevertheless, we're proposing that as an active amenity with parkour, so exposed boulders and stumps. 4 fitness stations located with bump outs for the exercise area off the micro and major off-street pathways. 6 benches, 3 picnic tables, school bus stops throughout, a fishing pond with an observation/fishing pier. We're providing over a half mile, or almost a half mile, of the 8-foot major off-street pathways and a quarter mile of the 5-foot pathway. I mentioned part of the component of the PUD is a variety of product. So we're proposing 3 different product styles. The smaller up along Lincoln Road is what we're considering or calling our cottage style product, and it's gonna range from 1,100 to 1,800 roughly square foot, a variety of single story and 2-story with 2-car garage. And then the medium size is mostly our 2-car product, but it will range in that, say, 1,300, 1,400 square foot up to 1,800 to 2,000 square foot. And then we'll have our large product, which borders some of our more detailed common areas like the fishing pond and also the north and east boundaries. And that's gonna be in that 8,000 square foot range of lots with both 2 and 3-car, but most of those 3-car garage, some RV garage capabilities. So it's a range of choices, I suppose, for people in this area of town. And just to kind of go through, I wanted to show just briefly a few of the home samples of what, again, this is the cottage product that's the 400 to 4,500 square foot lots. These are just some of the home styles that we've been building in some of our other communities throughout Treasure Valley in that product line. I'm going backwards, aren't I? Okay, so some of our more mid-size, again, these are larger home sites or larger homes on medium-sized home sites with 2-car garage capabilities, and it's going to be a full range of, say, 1,400 up to 2,000 square foot. And then finally, our larger home sites surrounding some of our more premier common areas. I wanted to show just a couple of quick photo examples of some of our home, and it's going to be a similar interior finish and product throughout all 3 of these product lines. This is our bathrooms and some of our baths. These are some of the living areas. This is just a rendering showing the project. I think the significance of this is, I think, with the footprints of the building shown on there with the staggered footprints or staggered setbacks, you can see the breakup somewhat of the house wall and not creating that wall effect or one singular wall effect. You can also see from this the extent of the Mason Creek frontage and how much of the project or property is cut by this, diagonal, bisecting of Mason Creek. It was quite an obstacle with that and the slopes along it. But I think what our planners have come up with here is a great, making lemonade out of lemons here. And I'm excited about this community, because it's unlike anything we've done in Caldwell in the past, and I think it's got potential to be a really nice community. Just quickly, this is our phasing. We're starting with the green, which would be the project you've already reviewed, which is the Huntington Ridge West. That would be our phase 1. Then we jump over to the orange and the purple would be phase 2, and then back to the yellow. So you can see we're kind of breaking up. We're trying to mix in a variety of product styles with each of these phases. So ultimately, it's going to be, 5 phases. 6 actually, but 2 of them we're going to develop together so that we've got that emergency vehicle access for phases 2 and 3. So in summary, the maximum density allowed in the residential, low-density residential, is 180 lots or 3 per acre. We're proposing 8 more, 188. The PUD would allow up to 361 if you assume the 6 per acre. There's no way we could get that without the PUD restriction or the PUD assistance in allowing smaller lots. So without the PUD's second item that I mentioned, as far as the lot reduction size, we'd be looking at probably 100 lots in this thing, with the amount of space that's being eaten up by the Mason Creek and slopes, as well as the particular care that we've got to do on the floodplain and the pond and some of those kind of things. So the PUD is really necessary in order to make this project feasible. Proposing the variety of lots that we are and house options. While we're only proposing single-family detached, this area of Caldwell and Lincoln Road is not proposed to contain any commercial use per the comp plan. The variety of lot sizes and houses will allow Huntington Ridge to provide a variety of price points, while also allowing residents to experience a community design with extensive active and passive common areas. The development plan does not call for development of any non-permitted zoning designations. The development plan conforms to the general purposes and objectives of the 2040 comprehensive plan. And per the staff report, the developer has provided for open space sidewalks and connecting micro pathways throughout the development to internal amenities, and has a good plan of connecting pathways, amenities, and open spaces. We're in compliance and actually exceeding the required code provisions for the amenities with our package. The compensation that we're proposing, in my opinion, greatly outweigh the code flexibility that we're asking for with the PUD. And then for these reasons, I request your approval tonight for our annexation PUD and preliminary plat, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I think I do not have questions, but I appreciate your presentation. It was rather thorough. Well, I do have a question on the phasing plan. Is that part of this application? I don't recall seeing the phasing plan in the packet. Well, I guess it is now as part of your testimony.
Yeah, that was included with our application.
Okay. So this might be better for staff, but what are the impacts on the design of the floodplain? What accommodations did you have to do to work with the floodplain issue?
Well, as part of the floodplain, what's driving that is the high groundwater. So the pond that we're excavating is going to be a source for gravels for raising the surrounding footprints or building pads. So we're going to excavate, create an amenity out of the pond, while at the same time building the lots that are to above the base flood elevations. So we're going to have to go through a full floodplain elevation or floodplain application, map revision with the city and FEMA.
Okay. Thank you very much, I appreciate your testimony, and, we'll have a chance to, address more questions in rebuttal. Next I have, is it Alec, Equila?
I don't want to speak.
Okay, I'm sorry if I,
Oh, you're fine.
okay, Mr. Carpenter?
I didn't have anything to add, I'm here for engineering report, any engineering questions about that.
Thank you very much. See if I missed anything. Mr. Boutros, would you like to testify? You might mention that, we have a letter from Mr. Boutros, which I'll enter into, excuse me, the record as, ANN 22-1, Exhibit 1. Go ahead, Mr. Boutros.
Ramsey Boutros, 1116 Winella Drive, Caldwell, 83605. I'm speaking today on the application for the subdivision and annexation of Huntington Ridge East. This development is actually part of a larger development that includes Huntington Ridge West. While I received notice of the west subdivision, I did not receive notice of the east subdivision because of the 300-foot distance notification. Even so, these two subdivisions should be treated as one, a reality that you, Mr. Hearing Examiner, recognized at the February 15th hearing for the west subdivision by not allowing that subdivision to go to the city council until the east subdivision also went to the city council. This is significant because the traffic flow within and around the combined subdivision was uncertain at the February 15th hearing, both for resident traffic and for emergency services. At the February 15th hearing, the developer also mentioned a condition of the current property owner that no collector or stub road interfere with their property. But the developer also offered to violate that condition at the February meeting, and that violation is included in the Huntington Ridge East staff report on page 12 under the street paragraph 3. So, my first question, is there any non-hearsay evidence that this matter was resolved with the property owner? I'll press on and hopefully you'll come back to these at the end. That's your call. As you, the hearing examiner, mentioned, the stub provides the dual access needed for emergency services as a minimum and which are needed as soon as homes are occupied. It's logical to conclude that the stub needs to be developed as a road right away, which clearly and immediately violates the developer's agreement with the property owner. My next question, if it was not resolved, how can this plat be acceptable for emergency vehicle traffic flow? My next question, how does a space reserved for a future substreet help residents and emergency services when the development is built and services may be needed immediately? At the February 15th hearing, the developer discussed how Huntington Ridge East would add approximately 157 housing units. That number is now 188 housing units, and they show appallingly small, quote, cottage lots of only 4,194 square feet. The staff report also describes this entire development as infill, but it is not infill. It is the largest single development currently under consideration for annexation in this area near Canyon Hill, and it doesn't infill. It determines the character of all developments around it. It is also not compatible with current use, as current use is agricultural, and even nearby proposed residential uses are not the density of the cottage lots. Mr. Hearing Examiner, the small 4,194 square foot lots should not be allowed. This developer should comply with the comprehensive plan. Please also note that on page 6 of the staff report, paragraph O, discusses minimum gross area of 5 acres as PUDs, unless they qualify as infill. This is intended to allow infills of less than 5 acres, which is much different and needs different development conditions than a 60-acre development. Huntington Ridge East should not be defined as infill. This point is brought further home on page 8 of the staff report, paragraph 6A. The developer is asking for extreme deviations from the baseline R1 zoning, which reduce livability and increase crowding. The city of Caldwell has a responsibility to adhere to the necessary zoning, not to facilitate building of congested housing. Please force this developer to comply with the current R1 zoning. On page 17 of the staff report, under the goals and policies, property rights paragraph requiring compliance with R1 zoning is consistent with allowing development without violating the comprehensive plan. Because there is no violation of property rights if R1 zoning is required, as noted above, it is to the benefit of all citizens that the development comply with the comprehensive plan and R1 zoning should be required. Next question, will you enforce the comprehensive plan by requiring R1 zoning compliance? I read the staff report looking for an input from the Caldwell School District. There was none, either at the February hearing or in this staff report. Is this because the Caldwell School District can accept the children from 274 housing units, or because they have despaired of trying to get the meaningful attention of the city? We don't have an answer, which means that facts are missing, not that there is concurrence. In a quasi-judicial hearing, decisions that cannot be undone should not be made in the absence of important facts. It would be prudent to seek a definitive answer from the Caldwell School District before this development is allowed to proceed to the City Council. Mr. Hearing Examiner, I have seen that even when they acknowledge the school district crises, the City Council approves developments anyway. I fear that you are the only authority who is considering the severity of the situation. I am concerned that as the city carelessly puts the school districts in an impossible situation, the school districts will react by seeking legal recourse. At one hearing, an applicant mentioned that if the Van Buren School is full, children can attend the Mosaic School. This is not correct and is just arm waving to get through a hearing. The Mosaic School is a charter school and enrollment is by lottery, which means that no child is guaranteed enrollment there. The Caldwell School District must still fulfill its obligation to enroll students living within its boundaries. My next question, will you require staff to obtain a definitive statement from the Caldwell School District on their ability to accept new students from a 274-unit development? At the February hearing, I testified on the traffic issue and the planned solution of continuing Aviation Way and Smead Parkway to Lincoln Road. I asked that this development be tied to the road improvement plan so that we did not find all the new traffic having to exit the area through Canyon Hill to Marble Front in Illinois. That condition was not granted in February, and now the developer wants to worsen the problem by increasing Huntington Ridge East from 157 housing units to 188. My next question, I ask again that a condition be added to any approval to ensure that necessary road improvements be implemented as development occurs. Will you agree to this condition? On page 14 of the staff report, the irrigation paragraph discusses details for provision of irrigation, but does not offer any analysis of whether the development will use more or less water than the previous water rights on that property. Since we are hearing about chronic drought conditions, it is necessary to protect existing property water rights of the entire community by ensuring any new development doesn't use more than their share. We cannot afford to default in favor of a developer in the absence of data. We need this data before this development is allowed to proceed. Will you require an irrigation water rights analysis before approving this development? On page 18 of the staff report, Goal 3 states, protect the public health and general welfare of the citizens of Caldwell. This development does nothing to accomplish this goal. Instead, the existence of this development will create more demands on taxpayer resources to fund infrastructure. Even then, there will be permanent adverse effects due to increased traffic, increased classroom congestion, and increased competition for commercial services. What this development does accomplish is congested housing that is antithetical to the public health and welfare. My last question, will you weigh the true impacts of this development to the community by recognizing that this development does not protect the public health and general welfare of the citizens of Caldwell? I stand for any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. I do not have questions. You've been pretty explicit, and we'll address some of those with staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, signed up to testify, are Teresa Solis.
We don't.
Okay. That is all who have signed up to testify. I would like to have the bit of a discussion here, some of the points made by the developer and Mr. Boutros, with staff. I think, something of this nature, it does take a little time to review that and give the kind of proper answers that you might expect. That's not particularly what we're equipped to do here, having just seen this presentation. But it does raise one question, which is the issues about the school district. Do we have any communication at all with the school district on either of these, the Huntington East or West developments?
We received no comments for either development.
And when we receive no comments,
They were notified for both. They were notified for both.
I'm sure they're notified, but that leaves us in a quandary without their active participation, either pro or con. We can only assume that they don't have an issue, and unfortunately, I don't know if they have a history of actively participating in land use decisions like this. It's my wish, and it's been my wish as a professional planner, to have the school districts participate in land use decisions. It has been my experience. In fact, I taught a class at this to school administrators at BSU to simply say to get involved in your community land use decisions. And it surprised me what I found, at least in that classroom experience, was that the future school administrators were not really taught or coached to be part of this process. Now that might be, a long time ago, things have changed, but I would like nothing better than see them as an active partner in land use decisions. But unfortunately, without that response from the Caldwell School District, we don't have the opportunity to drill down on those questions. They know this is a proposal in front of them, and if they don't comment, we don't really have a place to go with that.
Mr. Eggleston, if I may, on that topic, staff has reached out to Caldwell School District, as with Valley View School District, to participate in that conversation and the master planning portion of this. Caldwell has indicated an interest in doing that, so they're aware that staff is meeting these comments and things, and they've still chosen not to provide some comment back. They are planning to participate in a couple of activities that we have planned out in June, which indicates that there's some interest in in at least starting to get involved with this. But to say that they just aren't participating or don't have the opportunity to know that they can provide comment to us is not, a fair assessment either.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz, I stand corrected if I gave that impression. Now, there's, one issue that Mr. Brewster brought up, in regards to the, Airport Way. I don't quite understand the ramifications, the question that, Rob, if you could address, question about, on page 12, item 3, Aviation Way located along the east boundary development to be classified as a minor arterial. If you could, illuminate that for me, if we do have an issue there.
So, Mr. Hearing Examiner, because of the way the site lays out, they have the obligation to extend the Florida alignment, which is a collector through the site. But on the east edge of their property, that lines up with the aviation alignment. And aviation is classified as a minor arterial. And so as part of this development, they have proposed to construct that half portion of aviation adjacent to their development on the east side. The tricky thing about transportation is when everything's built out, the transportation system functions because it's all built as it's supposed to be. But as in a situation like this where Caldwell is developing, you have areas where it's built out and areas where it's not, then you do run into some transportation problems. In this case, aviation is being constructed by the development, as we have required, but the connection cannot be made to, Lincoln Road until there's a development on the east side that helps contribute to that connection. And so, with the properties that are there on, off of Lincoln Road, those out parcels there are some obstructions there. And so, as development comes in, we obligate as much as we can, to try to get these developments to build as much of the roadway section as they can. And then with the master plan in place, once everything's built out, or when we get to arrive to that point, then, the traffic functions appropriately and, within a level of service that's, acceptable. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I think that, addresses Mr. Boutros' question. Yeah, you can't, obligate, developer A to developers B a portion of that, road improvement. And, that's never been approached before, in this, way that we do develop. At this point, I'd like to, offer rebuttal to the applicant. And, addressed, some of those issues, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Eggleston. Tim Mockwa again with Hayden Homes, 1406 Main Street, Meridian, Idaho, 83642. So, regarding the extension of Florida, I've got this exhibit here that shows Florida Avenue. You can see the hatched red, diagonal hatched red. There's multiple projects that are south of Lincoln Road down to Marble Front that have already been developed. Liberty Springs, just on the south side of Lincoln, is south of our Huntington Ridge West project. Then you've got El Monterey subdivision, which I believe is an approved PUD with higher densities than what we're proposing. My point is neither of those nor the existing subdivision south of that down to Marble Front had an extension of Florida Avenue through them. So putting Florida Avenue in that location at this point just doesn't make sense, nor is it, really serving any purpose other than it's a north-south collector road. So I'm not sure what Mr. Boutros was talking about when he said I agreed to violate. I think what he was referring to is, I had made a comment that our seller of these parcels would not allow us to proceed with the deal if we put that collector road across their property. And so as such, we talked to city, staff and agreed that we would do it as part of the Huntington Ridge West or East. And I think we've talked about that quite a bit. So as mentioned earlier, whether it's along the Florida alignment or the quarter-mile section or across Huntington Ridge East, no matter which side that collector road's on, it doesn't abut that, the attorney's letter. And so I think that's the main point. Regarding aviation to the south, we're proposing, as per code, to construct our half of the collector, or minor arterial of aviation across our eastern boundary. Not unlike what we did with Voyage Crossing. You know, it was private development in our Voyage Crossing project that built aviation from, just north of Chinden all the way through to Marble Front. And now it's a very valuable road in the city of Caldwell system. Regarding some of the other comments or questions that were brought up, I would agree this is not infill. I would agree with Mr. Boutros on that. I don't think that's a criteria for use of a PUD. I think staff can comment on what the criteria for use of a PUD are. The 5 acres a minimum, we meet the criteria for doing a PUD, and we're meeting the requirements of the comp plan in doing so. We're going to look at one thing here. So this just shows, you can see where Huntington Ridge East and West are. Although I would agree it's probably not infill, it's surrounded by developed property and the recently approved Liberty Springs and El Monterey and Gulf County subdivision. So the property to the west of us, to the west of Huntington Ridge West, is all developed, single-family subdivisions. I'm not sure what Mr. Boutros, where he got the 157, or if that was just a number I misspoke at our February hearing, but at the time of our February hearing, we were at 189 lots in Huntington Ridge East. We reduced to 188 to accommodate the stub street that you had conditioned. I don't have anything else. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, sir. I do not have any further questions. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, I don't think I have any further questions of the staff, either, we move to the analysis, phase of this. We do have before us a completion, essentially, of the Huntington Ridge project, application for that. And the staff analysis and findings support the application. I'm looking at the comprehensive plan analysis beginning on page 17 of the staff report. And, I do agree with the, goals and policies that, are stated here, that, the application, is consistent with. I have nothing to add. I think they're, complete to describe the, compliance with the comprehensive plan for this proposal. On page 18, addressing the annexation specifically, we have findings of facts for the annexation proposal. The Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinance, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The conclusions of law for the annexation application. The Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case and recommend to the Caldwell City Council that it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met. The hearing was legally noticed and posted, and the hearing was held and conducted under the requirements of the Idaho Code and city ordinances. The recommendation for annexation, based on the findings of facts and the conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby recommends to the mayor and city council the case number ANN 22-000001, a request to annex 60.21 acres, more or less, within R1 low-density residential zoning designation for the property of R34792 50 and R3479701 and a portion of R34797 50 in Caldwell, Idaho, be approved with conditions of approval in section 9. Looking at the conditions of approval for the rezone, on page 19 of the staff report, we have conditions of approval 9.2 and 9.3. To that, I would like to add condition of approval 9.4, and to the effect that I'm referencing some notes here which I'll submit to the record for accuracy, that the failure to comply with conditions of development as provided for herein and develop the property in accordance with the identified development plan for Huntington Ridge East subdivision shall result in the subject property being reverted to a zoning designation of RS1 residential estates. The zoning designation with least intensive permitted land uses analogous to the original agricultural zone designation land use existing prior to annexation of the property into the city of Caldwell. That is 9.4. I'd like to add 9.5. Upon failure to comply with conditions imposed for the Huntington Ridge East subdivision, order decision development agreement may be terminated by the city, and the zoning designation upon which the use is based upon may be reversed upon failure of the owner, developer, or each subsequent owner or person acquiring an interest in the subject parcel to comply with the commitments in the agreement within 3 years in accordance with Caldwell City Code, section 10-03-7 PED. And that concludes the conditions of approval for the annexation. Moving to the planned unit development and preliminary plat. Again, the goals and policies stated in the staff report, pages 17, 18. The comp plan do provide the context for this application, and which is consistent with those goals and policies. The findings and facts, Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The conclusions of law, the plan unit development and preliminary plat. For the plan unit development and preliminary plat are as follows. The Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case and recommend to the Caldwell City Council to be approved or denied. The public notice requirements are met, the hearing is legally noticed and posted, and the hearing is held and conducted under the requirements of Idaho Code and city ordinances. In section 12, the recommendation for the plan unit development and preliminary plat. Based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby recommends to the mayor and city council the case number PDD 22-1 and SUB 22-5, request for preliminary plat approval of Huntington East Ridge subdivision, 188 residential lot development on parcels R3479250 and R3479701 000, and a portion of R3479750, 60.21 acres more or less in Caldwell, Idaho, be approved with the conditions of approval below. The conditions of approval, beginning on page 19, entail item 14.1 through items 14.15, ending on page 21 in the staff report. I concur with the conditions of approval and recommend them as such to the mayor and city council. And with that, I will close this hearing and adjourn the meeting for tonight. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you for your testimony.